Hey everyone, this is John Coleman. Welcome to our crossover Friends with Your Benefits LinkedIn Live episode. Today, for our crossover episode, we have the host of one of my favorite healthcare podcasts out there. We have the man, the myth, the guy on my coffee cup,
Yes.
Spencer Smith from Self Funded with Spencer. Hey Spencer, how's it going? Welcome to our LinkedIn Live.
John, hey, thanks for having me, man. This is a lot of fun, and I appreciate the request for a mug. Thanks for the
Thank
plug
you.
for that. I hope the coffee tastes as good as it does in any other mug. I've got one at home at my house, but I don't like drinking with my own face on a cup. It's strange.
Well, definitely high quality mug. And for all you out there, definitely recommend talking to Spencer about his great coffee mug. So,
Yeah.
Spencer, really today we're going to talk about social selling and employee benefits, right? These are two terms you don't necessarily hear together all the time, but it's certainly a really important topic that we should cover. So, before we get into it, so you talk to a lot of brokers, consultants, and even HR people out there.
Yeah.
What are you really hearing out there as it relates to the latest and greatest benefit trends?
Yeah, so fortunately or unfortunately, depending on the way you look at it, I get inundated a lot with folks that want to be on the show to talk about solutions, which is
Sure.
really cool. I'm grateful for being in that position, but also it's difficult sometimes to sift through what works and doesn't work. So I'm hesitant to go like the craziest, most innovative things solely because I don't have enough to say whether or not I would give them a nod of approval. But some of the things that I think, although they've been around for a while, are constants in my world of what gets discussed are things like direct primary care, which I'm sure, John, you know quite a bit about and
Sure.
have an opinion on. That's one of those that I think fits, even though it's been around for a while, trend wise, it's being talked about a lot more. And I
Yep.
think it's more and more relevant these days. Number two, financial wellness benefits, like an enhanced benefit where you educate members and they have access to coaching, but it's objective information that doesn't necessarily lead to the purchasing or the recommendation of a whole life policy, things like that. So
Right.
actual financial literacy. And the last one, and I really would love your opinion on this, John, is the CAA. So, the Consolidated Appropriations Act. And
Yep.
it's not necessarily a benefits trend, but it is a hot button item, especially for self-funded employers to discuss. So I'll leave you carte blanche to how you want to respond to those three.
Absolutely. Yes. I guess let's go through them. So, in terms of direct primary care, certainly if you have enough employees in a given location, and I believe the minimum is about 1,000 employees in a given location, certainly makes sense. And you could certainly cover the capitated costs for putting a model like that in place. But on the flip side, let's say you're a smaller employer and you want to take advantage of an on site clinic. It might not make financial sense to actually have an on site clinic, but what you can do is have a near site clinic where you partner with other employers in the area, and then you have a doctor, a practice, or one of these specialty providers out there actually host the clinic. So certainly very, very value add potential for huge ROI. We all know that there's a huge issue with making sure that members get access and timely access to primary care providers and spend
Yeah.
quality time with them. Spencer, obviously, financial wellness continues to be super, super important. One thing that I've seen in the marketplace recently that is taking steam to help solve that gap is these things called lifestyle spending accounts.
Mhm.
And the way to think of lifestyle spending accounts is they are a post-tax benefit, but it's really a new flavor of defined contribution, right? So an employer can say, hey, Spencer, we're going to provide $500 for all employees. And here's a broad brush of categories that they can actually use them in. And one thing can be financial wellness. So let's say you have a low paid workforce. We all know that grocery inflation is going through the roof right now. And you could say, hey, employees out there, you can actually use this fund for your grocery bill. Or you can also do traditional things like gym memberships and what have you.
Okay.
And then just in terms of regulations, so things continue to change as it relates out there. The pharmacy portion of the CAA is due at the end of this year. And I think all clients are trying to figure out the best way to do that, whether it's partnering with their PBM or whatnot. And then obviously those massive healthcare price transparency files are out there. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that are working on them right now to kind of make sense of them, but you really need a supercomputer to go
Yeah.
over that.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's what's the data set that you get is not exactly digestible, right? Without being superhuman at Excel or some sort of SQL database engineer. But you were telling me, John, beforehand, and it was a pretty cool looking item. I don't know exactly if it's what it was, but you're like, hey, I'm testing this thing out, and I wanted to bring it up. So what was that thing that you were working on with your back?
Sure. So
Yeah.
I think if I can show it on the screen, I'm not sure if it's going to be mirrored or not. So little backstory. Last week I went on an awesome family vacation. but I did something a little silly. We went to the beach, had an awesome day, and we're getting towards the end of the day. We're all tired, and we have one of those beach umbrellas, right? You twist it into the sand. So I go at the end and I go to pull it out of the sand, and I jacked up my back. I felt that immediate shoot of pain. Last
Okay.
few days, I knew I had to do something. So I'm thinking physical therapy. So I go on my company's intranet, and they offer us a digital form of physical therapy called Sword Health. And basically, I talked to an actual physical therapist. And a few days later, they sent me this tablet in the mail,
Okay.
along with all these little sensors that I put on my body. And basically, the tablet guides me through a series of exercises each day. So, third day doing it so far, incrementally better, probably a little too early to judge, but I certainly like the approach. And I'm glad I don't need a script for physical therapy, and I haven't had to go to the orthopedist yet.
Yeah. So, hey, you get to be a little guinea pig. And are you going to document the findings or the results on a video or
Yeah,
something?
yeah. So great segue, Spencer. So in the near future, we will be doing a video that involves unboxing,
Cool.
setting up, and then my own personal feedback on how the product actually performs.
Awesome.
So Spencer certainly spent a little bit of time talking about employee benefits, right?
Yep.
So I believe Elon Musk said a few months ago that he believes email is essentially dead, right? We all get way too many emails, and I have the point of view that cold calling is dead,
Mm.
right? So I'm seeing all that you're doing on social media and LinkedIn and with your podcast. So whether or not you're a broker, a consultant, or maybe you happen to work on the HR side and you want to get the word out about some unlimited PTO plan that you're rolling out, walk us through the best way to do that, whether it's LinkedIn or any other platforms. What do you see work well? What
Mm.
should you avoid? Any tips and tricks I think our audience would really
Sure.
love. And for
Sure.
audience members out there, we encourage you just to any questions you have to type in the chat, and Spencer and I will try to get to as many of them as possible.
Yeah, definitely. Please ask questions, and we'll try to get to them if at all possible. One thing I was to say, Elon Musk may have said email is dead, but he also said he's going to buy Manchester United. So we'll see if that actually those things actually happen. I would agree probably to a modest degree with cold calling being dead. However, I just don't like to cold call. So that's probably why
Sure.
my opinion is that that is the case. I know some people are really good at it.
Yep.
But what I think that really speaks to more is there's a better way to get more awareness in probably in a shorter period of time about what you do. One of my friends, Andy Neary, I don't know if anybody on this call listens to him. John, I know you probably are connected with him.
Great
He
guy.
uses the term exponential awareness. And so what I perceive that to mean, and I think what he means about that is, hey, if I make one cold call, I talk to one person or I leave one
Yep.
voicemail, right? If I make one video that happens to get a little bit of traction and a bunch of commentary, I might have thousands of eyeballs on that one video. And maybe it took me 5 minutes to create, 10 minutes to craft the post, and maybe I'm all in 20 or 30 minutes. But that
Sure.
one video can live in perpetuity and it's continuing to attract attention if it's a decent post. So
Right.
that exponential awareness is, hey, what can you use from a content creation standpoint to attract as much good attention to what you do without having to do the cold calling, the cold emailing, the knocking on doors, and things
Right.
like that. Yeah. Yeah. So the other thing I would say is from a lead generation perspective, that same exponential awareness often over time builds an audience of people that like you, that want to know what
Mhm.
you do, and eventually find you, seek you out to say, hey, what is this thing? What is this plan site? How could you
Yeah.
help me at Mercer? Things like that. So, from a lead generation perspective, although I don't do it intentionally and I never really do calls to action to call me to talk plan, inevitably that's what happens. And I've had a number of sales that I can point to directly. They came to me because of social media connection or an idea or a value system I communicated. So I think lead generation for the salespeople out there, it's considerably better and I think more fruitful than that smiling and dialing technique.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What do you think about that? Like, I'm curious, you're starting to venture in the LinkedIn landscape a lot more, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I guess with me, I started Friends with Your Benefits, one word, on YouTube, right? And basically, my philosophy was, okay, I'll go in the YouTube world and I'll try to really help people make better benefit decisions. And if no one watches the videos, then I kind of just let it die and
Mhm.
forget all about that, right? So I personally saw that after a few months of doing it, it was worthwhile to start engaging my audience, which are fellow consultants, and then the HR community at large out there, and really just give them informative information. So, really just in terms of what I found really works is anytime you personalize the experience,
Yes.
right? You make
Yeah.
it relatable. If I talk like consultant, no one wants to hear John talk like consultant, right? They
Yeah.
want to hear what is John's personal experience and how could this potentially benefit, my organization or whatever is going on out there, right?
Mhm.
What One thing that I also did on the YouTube front, and I saw this a little bit on LinkedIn, and curious to hear your thoughts on this, Spencer. So I was really surprised, and I guess that's a trend, how important hashtags are, right?
Ah,
So if you
yeah.
have a hashtag, particularly on LinkedIn, it helps people find your video. So just curious your thoughts just on how hashtags have worked or haven't
Well,
worked.
I mean, I always include hashtags, right? It's a hit or miss which one's actually the most relevant or which one will be the most beneficial. But I tell you, Eric Silverman's a great example. He built a very big LinkedIn following by being consistent about what he was posting. But he
Sure.
also has a hashtag he uses all the time, hashtag rockstars rocking. So
Nice.
he owns that hashtag, right? Anytime anybody sees that hashtag, that's his videos.
Sure.
So that's a pretty interesting way you could use that almost to brand what you do as well, if you're consistent enough about doing it. I would echo, John, what you're saying about the personal stuff. I've thought about this quite a bit and I've seen it come to fruition in my own life. Is the personal stuff tends to have 4, 5, 10 times engagement to the business stuff. Even if you're purely business all the time, you might get 100 times the engagement if you just do one single personal post every once in a while. Because people
Sure.
want to know you and people want to do business with you, right? Not
Right. Yeah.
necessarily Mercer, although I'm sure they seek out Mercer, but I want to
Yeah.
work with John, who happens to work with Mercer. Now I have a great marriage of two high quality things.
Right. And then the final thing I'll just say just on YouTube. So some people call it dark arts, but what has helped me too, there's these big things called SEO, and that's basically
Yeah,
search engine optimization.
right,
And everyone knows that Google is the world's largest search engine, but not everyone realizes that YouTube is the world's number 2
right.
search engine out there, right? So I really just try to tailor the correct keywords in my videos in order to help bring the audience who's not familiar with me in.
I'm going to start using TubeBuddy to go look at your videos, man. I told you that the other day. I need to see what the secret sauce is that
Well,
you got.
there you go. There you go.
Yeah,
And certainly you use whatever hashtags and SEO tags that I have in your videos going forward.
awesome.
So Spencer, one thing I just want to close out on is really, so you've been doing this podcasting thing for a little bit of time now, right? So what are
Mhm.
some really things that you wish you knew back in March of 21? I believe that's when you started your podcast that you
Mhm.
now know today. What are some lessons learned that you would tell Spencer back then?
Well, so let me hit you with one fact that I just discovered that I think is salient for today's conversation.
Yeah.
I found out that if you make 21 episodes or more, you're in the top 1% of all podcasts that are ever in existence.
No kidding. Wow.
So
That's a fun fact.
90% of people don't make it past episode 3,
Hmm.
and 99% don't make it past episode 20. So
Incredible.
technically speaking, I'm in the top 1% just by making, I think I'm at episode 58 or 59 released so far.
Well,
So that was
congrats on
kind
that.
of cool. That's reassuring, right? As if you just stick with it, you're going to be better off than 99% of the people that actually decided they want to do a podcast and then quit 3 or 4 weeks later. So
Right. Yeah.
I would reassure people, and then now I also caution you at the same time. So the caution will say it is a lot of freaking work. I mean, it really
Well,
is.
oh yeah, undoubtedly so.
Um,
Yeah.
and especially the way I do it, I put a little more effort into the production, but there's setup, there's obviously scheduling guests, there's writing questions in advance, doing the podcast, editing, posting. It's possible I might spend 4 to 6 hours a week on one individual podcast all in, which isn't a
Hmm.
ton. I do it in the morning, I do it over lunch, I do it on
Sure.
the weekends. It's a passion project. But imagine 2 episodes a week, 3 episodes a week like
Right.
that. And all of a sudden it's interfering with your life and your job and things like that. So I would definitely caution people that don't go into it without the reality check that this is going to be work if you want it to actually be good.
Absolutely. And I saw that you recently launched a newsletter. So tell me about that. Why did you decide to go the newsletter route on LinkedIn?
Well, so that was a recommendation from my friend Allison DePauli down in San Antonio. Shout out to Allison.
Nice.
She asked me, she's like, well, are you going to do a newsletter? And I said, well, why would I do that? And she said, well, one, she got 800 subscribers like within a couple weeks, right?
Wow.
So what it does, I think I hit 1,500 after a couple weeks too, but it's intentional interaction with your stuff. So the
Mhm.
newsletter allows you to notify people. So anybody that subscribes, it shows
Sure.
up in their notifications. So you don't have to rely on, oh, I hope it pops in their feed or I hope they come to my profile. It will notify them as long as they're subscribers. So they will always see the
Interesting.
content or at least be aware the content exists.
Right.
Hopefully they'll read it. Hopefully they'll watch the podcast. Those are multiple steps after that. But just the awareness element of it for me is probably the most, the biggest reason why I did it.
Awesome. And I believe, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that LinkedIn does not charge for the newsletter. So it's a free
Correct.
service you can take advantage of, right?
Yeah, and I don't know if certain people qualify or if you have to be in creator mode. There's probably a couple hoops you have to jump through because they like to beta test stuff first before they
Okay.
like publicly release it. So I don't know if everybody will be able to do it. If anybody has questions about how to do it, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'll give you a brief tutorial. But if you have a basic ability to write, you know how to follow a couple instructions, I mean, you can probably set your first one up in half an hour at most. And I do it once a week. So it's really not a lot of effort, but it's a great way, like I said, to keep people aware of what's going on.
Awesome. Well, that's definitely some great advice. I personally don't have a newsletter, but I may look to do one in the future. So I'll let you know how that goes, and appreciate all the great tips on that, Spencer. So
Yeah.
Spencer, lastly, so your podcast, right?
Yes. Yeah.
How do people actually find your podcast? Like, what's the best place to go to actually watch everything that's the latest and greatest that Self-Funded with Spencer is all about?
Yeah, so I appreciate that question, John. So obviously YouTube, we've talked about quite a bit. I even had a pandering post a little bit ago, just saying, please help me get over 1,000 subscribers. So if you just do Self-Funded with Spencer, that's the easiest way to find it there. Same naming convention on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, you name it. And then even if you want to see clips or things like that, just follow me on LinkedIn as well.
Cool. And congratulations. I saw you hit a recent milestone with your podcast. So why don't you tell our audience about that real quick?
Yeah, so I hit 10,000 total listens, which, in the grand scheme of things is not a huge number, but it's one of those things that just is a nice milestone to say, hey, I've accomplished this threshold, and hopefully that means at least people are somewhat interested in what I'm doing.
Awesome. Well, Spencer, really appreciate you coming on the program today. And after the LinkedIn Live, Spencer and I will take a look at the chat. So any final questions that you guys have, feel free to type and we will go through them. But Spencer, thank you again, and really, really appreciate this awesome coffee mug and coffee held up throughout the podcast.
Great, John. Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And to our audience out there, we encourage you to like this, find us both on YouTube as well as Spencer's channel. And until next time, thank you for joining, and thank you again, Spencer.
My pleasure.
All right, take care, everyone.